So hooray, again, we were able to put together the first screen, the button, and so forth. Okay, so let's go ahead and then create our second screen. So here it is, our second screen. We have our next screen or second screen just returning an empty container. All right, instead of returning an empty container, okay, of course we have to, what we're gonna do, we're gonna do the same thing that we did here. We're gonna create a scaffold, the user interface. So I'm gonna say new, return scaffold as such. And I'm going to say app bar, new app bar. I'm going to send here and say, let's start with background color. I'm going to make it green accents, just the same. Title, I'm going to say second screen. This has to be an actual text, so new text, second screen. Okay, and I want to center it to be true. So this is it for our second screen. Now, how do we then wire things up in our first screen here, home screen, so that we can open the second screen? Okay, this is where we're going to talk about the navigator. We've seen navigator before. In fact, we've seen navigator when we talked about pop-ups, alert dialogues, and how to turn them off and so forth, right? So now we're going to actually look at the navigator class or navigator object that will allow us to route our screens, route our applications so that we can point and open a different screen. It's very simple. All right, so all of that will happen inside of our onPressed, right? Because that's the whole idea. We want to be able to, when we enter something here, we say send, we then send whatever we entered here to the next screen. And we'll do that next. But for now, we just want to get that instant gratification of being able to go from this screen to the second screen. So what I'm going to do inside here is I'm going to create a method, right, an anonymous method here. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a var called router. Okay, and I'm going to use the new material page route. Now, the reason it says page route is because with material design, with actually are implemented on the web as well. That's the reason why instead of say material screen route says page route. So I come from the mobile development side of things. That's the reason why I call screens, but it's same thing in this case, right? So we're using this material page route, which of course, as you remember, all of these big widgets, we have to pass in the build context. See, we have to pass in because there is indeed a builder, there's settings, there's a lot of things we can pass in order for us to create a router, right? What a router does, well, allows us to connect with other screens. Okay, so this is what we do. We're creating a router, but we're asking the help of the material router object, material page route, I should say. All right, so hit enter. Now we're going to construct our builder. We've seen this before, haven't we? So now for our builder, we need to pass builder context. It's very important. You've seen this a few times now. And then finalize there. And then inside here, this is where we actually build our route, right? Our connection. Notice we haven't actually set up the navigation. So here we are saying, think of this as having, for instance, two cities that are divided by a river. In order for you to get from city A to the left of city B, you either could take a boat or we can build a bridge. In this case, we are building our bridge. Building the bridge doesn't mean that you will be able to go to the second city, right? You still have to either walk to that city or drive or bike there, whatever you do. Does it make sense? So now we're building the bridge so that it's there, and then we're going to be able to navigate to that bridge to get to the other side. Okay? Great. So what are we going to do here to build? Well, what are we building? Our bridge that we need to build has to go from here, which is this first home page or home screen, and we want to go to the next. Well, to go to the next, what is the next? Well, the next is going to be new, second, what did we call? Let's see. New next screen, as such. Now we're calling the other side. right? The other city. All right, that's it. Now, once we have our router here, we need to do something. Well, I gotta finish my sentence there. So once we have our router, then we're gonna call the navigator class, and navigator will know what to do. We can say dot, we have to pass of, where are we starting off, passing the context, so we know exactly where we are and we know all the resources of this place, so this home class, and say dot. Now here's what we're gonna do. We are going to push. What are we pushing? Well, we're pushing our router. Just like that. So we build the bridge. Now we are creating the actual car or the navigator that will allow us to go from city A to the left to city B to the right over the bridge. Okay? So navigator is our friend. We say navigator, we pass in the context, and we say push. What are we pushing? We're pushing the router. What the router is the bridge, which knows exactly where to get us to. In this case, is going to be the next screen, which indeed is this screen here. All right, let's see what's going to happen. Run. Okay, next. And we have an issue here. Well, it says the builder for route null returned null. Well, the problem here is that, yes, we created this new screen, but this builder here has to return something. That's the reason why we have to say return, something like that, and that should work, right? Or since we know lots about programming now, about creating succinct, less verbose code, we can just go ahead and get rid of all of this and use our fat operator here. I think that's what it's called. In this case, we don't have to say return because that implies we're returning something, and go like this. Right? Same thing, but we must return because then we're returning a new screen. There we go. So now let's go ahead and give it a run. Okay, click and second screen. Go back and shows first one. And you notice when you do this, Navigator knows exactly what it's doing, and because we are using the material page route, it even gives us a back button here. So we can go back even like this, or we can go back using this key, right? Using this button that it's given for us for free. The reason why, because we're using material page route. Ah, very cool. Very simply, we're able to open a new screen. The next thing we need to do is to be able to enter something here. And then when we say send to next, we want to pass the information that we enter here onto our next screen, and it has to show there. How do we do that? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to go to the next screen class here. We're going to create an instance variable. Okay, I'm going to call this final. I'm going to call this name. Let's make it a string, of course. And there it is. So what I'm going to do also, it says here I need to must be initialized. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to create a constructor to construct our object. And as I create this constructor, we're going to pass our name string and other things. I'm going to say command N. Okay, say constructor like that. I'm going to pass the name, say okay. But I'm going to go further here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to also make all of these, by the way, they're going to be optional members that we're passing. I'm going to pass the key. Okay, this is an object that will know the state and everything else that our current screen or our current widget knows. And then, of course, I'm passing this. And I'm going to invoke super and make sure that we're passing the key also. Okay, so we're just constructing our constructor, no pun intended here. But importantly, we are constructing this as well, which is the name that we're going to be receiving. Now, the beauty here is that because we have this name as an instance variable for our next screen, that means it's available everywhere here. So when we get to this screen, we're going to ask the next screen, say, hey, what is the value of that name which we'll be receiving? And we'll set everything up from our first screen. and we're going to display here. So now to access this, okay, the best way to do this, there's a few ways we can do this. So inside of our text here, because this is where we want to show, in fact, we could do that, but let's create a body here. I think it's better that way. I'm just going to say new list tile, and I'm going to give it a title, a new text as such. So I can go ahead and invoke such. I'm going to invoke the widget object, and it knows, look at what's happening here. The moment you say widget, it says which widget. Well, it's going to be the next screen. That means this is a widget, as we know, because it extends stateful widget. So now we're saying whenever we want to get anything inside, right, because it's an object or a class, we want to get to one of its children or one of its instance variables, we can just invoke widget. We could have done this as well, like this dot widget. Okay, so we can say enter, and then we can say dot, we can invoke name. Okay, as it is right now, everything is going to work fine because everything that we are passing in our constructor, it's optional. Had we removed these, then you notice we'll have problem here because it's saying, well, we must pass 2 arguments for this to work. So it's always a good idea to put the constructor arguments as optional. That way, unless you really want to make sure that your application must have those arguments. That means now we can pass, when we construct our next screen here, we can pass a string name or whatever else we want, right? Because now I can go ahead and say name, look at that. I can then pass, say, James. If you save this, look what's going to happen. Give it a run. I'm going to go so next, voila, it says James. Why? Because we were able to pass in, and then whenever we open the next, it's going to go and check, find, hey, let's see what that instance variable is going to have. If it has something, we're going to go through widget and say dot name and get that variable that we've passed. Oh, you see, this is great news because now in this case here, we passed something that we wrote, but now because we have our name field controller here, we can use that so that we can fetch whatever the users have indeed entered. So dot text, you've seen this before. Very cool. So if you save this, let's go back here. If I enter, let's say Paulo Dishon, and I say next, look at that, it says Paulo Dishon. If I go down here and add some more gibberish, go next, exactly the same. So we're now not only able to navigate to a second screen, but we're also able to move stuff from one screen to the next. Very nice. So you can see the things that you can do now, the power we have. Because now you can even, as a side little project, we can create a project that on the first screen you will have, for instance, an image. And when you tap that image, you want to take them to the next screen. And then you can attach information, text or numbers, whatever you want, data in general, that will be received on the second screen. Ooh, very cool. So think of applications that you can actually build real quick that will take advantage of this concept here that we've just learned. All right, as always, play around with this concept, and I'll see you in the next video where we will then learn how to then pass other information from second screen onto the first screen. Perfect. I'll see you next.